In this video, Dr. Jordan Peterson explains why you need to take responsibilities in life.
Because I do believe that it's perfectly appropriate for each of you to assume that what you inhabit in your own being is a microcosm of the entirety. I mean, what else could it possibly be? Especially if you take seriously the proposition that what being is constructed of is chaos and order. That's what you have in front of you, is chaos and order. And maybe you have just the right amount of it in front of you so that you could bring it into a harmonious relationship. I mean, you better, or there's going to be hell to pay. So it's not like it's optional. So what's optional is whether you accept the responsibility of doing it. That's what I think is optional. I also think that that's why people won't wake up. You know, because there's been a story throughout the entire history of mankind, since we became conscious, that people could wake up. They could become enlightened, but they don't. And you know, you hear people, especially the New Age people, and I think they were sort of motivated to begin with by Joseph Campbell and maybe by the human potential people, that if you just follow your bliss, that you could wake up. And I think that that's, I understand why that idea emerged. It's a classic 1960s idea, which is that you could have heaven with no responsibility whatsoever just by doing what felt good all the time. You know, and I think there's a kernel of truth in it. But the problem with the whole idea is that there's no responsibility in it at all. And I think that if you wake up, the problem with waking up is that you have to take responsibility. And then the question might be, well, how much responsibility do you have to take? And the answer to that might be, it depends on how much you want to wake up. Because if you want to wake up completely, maybe then you have to take responsibility for the whole thing. I think that's what it means. There's this old idea in Christianity that Christ took the sins of the world on his shoulders. And that's a very strange idea. And what Christianity has done with that idea to some degree is made the proposition that because Christ took the sins of the world on his shoulders and died for us as a consequence, that everything has been redeemed. But the problem with that, and this is the problem that Jung pointed out when he was talking about the development of science from alchemy, is that everything doesn't seem to have been redeemed. There's still plenty of problems. Part of the reason that Jung believed that alchemy developed into science in Europe was because the Christian community realized at an unconscious level that the proposition that reality had been redeemed by the death of Christ was an incomplete assumption because it didn't seem to be working. And so there was a tremendous emphasis on spiritual development in Christianity, and the idea of the death redeeming humanity was a spiritual idea, but it left the material world behind as something that was essentially damned. And Jung's idea was that the unredeemed material world was crying out, and human beings, especially in Europe, responded to that, and the way they responded to that was by beginning to dream that transformations of the material world could bring about the redeemed state, and that was the motivating dream that led to the emergence of science. You know, and if you don't have a better theory for why science emerged, that's a pretty damn good one, and you know, Jung spent a lot of time trying to figure that out. And, you know, it strikes me as something that's very much the case. So, maybe, and part of Nietzsche's commentary was that Christianity lost its moral force because it continually pushed paradise off to a place that was beyond death and alleviated the responsibility of all the individuals who were currently alive. It alleviated their responsibility to bring it about. And maybe that's why the whole damn thing came crashing down. It's like it lost its moral footing. I mean, Nietzsche is often regarded as perhaps the most influential anti-Christian who ever lived. But I have always read him as a salutary corrective. You know, if something's rotten, something that goes in there and destroys the rot is actually its friend, not its enemy. And I think that that was the role that Nietzsche played in relationship to Christianity. He thought that as soon as it had disappeared into some other world, then it had lost its moral right to exist, because it left everything behind. It's like the Buddhist doctrine that you can attain nirvana, you know, individually, and that's what you should be doing. You should detach yourself from existence and attain nirvana. Existence in and of itself can go to hell. It's like it's an irresponsible doctrine. You know, Buddha himself left nirvana to come back to redeem humanity. He decided, you know, one of his most fundamental temptations was the gods offered him the opportunity to stay in paradise. And he let that go so that he could come back, so to speak, and spread his teachings around to try to bring everything else up to the state of being redeemed. So I don't think that the idea that you can escape is a reasonable idea. I think it's a running away from responsibility. So